Hey everyone, my name is Sonia and I'm Managing Director at Converge. Welcome back. This is a part 2 series. We had our first part yesterday. Hope you were able to join me where I went through, I went through the whole process of offshoring your development project, and we sort of talked about, should you offshore a project? What are the pros and cons to offshoring? Does it make financial sense to offshore? What are some of the common things that cause offshore projects to fail? And what offshore company do you hire? So in this part 2 series, I'm going to look a little bit more in depth and discuss all the things to look for and do once you have decided to do your offshoring. So I have a lot of talking points here. I might not get to them all, but I will try my best as I'm going through. If anyone has any questions and you want to send them through, please do. I will try to get them. I will try to get to them while I'm doing my explanations here. So let's start with the first point. So you have decided that it makes sense to offshore your project. So now you have selected a vendor that you think is going to be good for the project. So what are the next steps? So the first thing you want to make sure that you are aware of and that you know and that you've done your research on is technical domain and industry domain, and making sure that the company you're going to select are experts in the technical domain and the industry domain. So what does that mean? Technical domain means that they have the technical expertise to be able to develop your project. And there's a couple of things when it comes to technical domain. It could mean that if your project requires something like artificial intelligence, the partner that you're going to select, they need to have expertise in that domain. If they don't, let's say they are a Python shop or a PHP shop or a .NET shop, and they've never done AI in the past, and they can't prove to you that they've done artificial intelligence in the past, then they're not a technical domain expert in that space. And so if they're not, then you might want to consider looking at someone who has more experience in that particular technical domain. Industry domain is a little bit different. So industry domain means the industry that you're in. Are you in oil and gas, mining, construction, manufacturing, health and safety, food service, many industries out there. So if you're in a very specific industry, it is good to select a vendor that has the industry domain, meaning, they know how your industry works, how it functions, the processes around it, and all of those things. It's when you select a vendor that has the industry domain, not only, are they good at developing the product for you, they also understand the business in that industry. They know people in the industry. They understand the lingual. They've been around. They've done projects in the past in those domains, and they will be able to add value to your project because of their expertise. So super important. Technical domain and industry domain. I would say, though, that's a number one to sort of look at once you've made the decision to go offshore and now you need like the right partner for you. Number two, which I touched base a little bit yesterday, but I want to touch base again today because it's super important, documentation. You need to make sure that you have a partner that has a track record of documenting the process, documenting every piece of requirement that is going to be built. The majority of offshore projects fail due to the lack of documentation. And what I mean by that is, you can't just pick up the phone and call someone and say, oh, I want to build a piece of software and I want it to do this, and that. Go ahead, go off and build it. That's not realistic. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help the developer, and it's going to create total chaos throughout the project because you're going to change your mind. The developer is going to get stuck. There are so many risks and assumptions in this model that basically set you up to fail. So documentation is super important, and you need to work with a company that has experience in doing documentation, meaning they're going to do proper documentation. You're going to have a business document that has the entire application laid out with wireframes, test cases, all the things that are required for a developer to look at and say, I can build this. So documentation, and with documentation also comes things like project charters and delivery schedules, all of the things that are going to make the project very organized and predictable. The third thing that I want to talk about is software development methodology. So there are different ways to develop software. There are, about 4 different methodologies. I'm only going to speak about 2 because these are the 2 main ones that I think are really relevant. And there are 2 different types of methodologies that are still being used in software development today. Number 1 is waterfall approach. And the second is Agile. Agile has become very popular in the last couple of years because it really allows a lot more visibility into the project. So I'll explain a little bit about waterfall. So waterfall is when you go to a vendor and you say, I want to build this and I want to know how long it's going to take and what the cost is going to be. And the cost is based on a fixed price. So it's going to take 6 months to build this project and it's going to cost you this much money. Then once the client agrees to the price and time, the development company sort of does all the documentation up front, and then they go off and build. While they're building, they're testing, etc. And then at the end of the development, they say, here you go, Mr. Client, we've developed everything we talked about, 6 months ago, and now you can have this. Well, a lot of the risks in waterfall is that the communication and the process of having visibility into your project early on, it doesn't really exist. The development company sort of goes off and develops everything, and you sort of see everything towards the end, which is not a great model to have. So because of all of those risks, most companies have now evolved into an agile development lifecycle, which is transparent. It allows the client and the developer to communicate more often, and it allows the client to have early visibility into everything that they do. Agile is based on a pricing model of time and material. So whatever time developer spends on the project on a weekly, monthly basis, the client gets billed for those hours and any material that's used as well. So that project, that model is great because you're going to get visibility into your project early on. You're going to get to see everything that's being done. You're going to be able to test. You're going to be able to verify, make sure that they're building the functionality according to your specs, everything like that. The only con to the Agile is obviously the cost. It's going to cost you a lot more to do time and material because if you don't have a schedule to when this project's going to end, it could go on forever and you could just be getting build. So what we've done at Converge, we've sort of taken the waterfall and the agile methodology, and we have created a hybrid of it. And what that hybrid is we develop in Agile, but we do the estimation in waterfall. So we calculate the estimate and we say, okay, we think it's going to take roughly 6 to 7 months to build this project. We build in some contingency and we bill it on a waterfall pricing model, but we develop on an agile pricing model. And what we do with the pricing is we take all of the costs and we divide it into the months that it's going to take to develop the project. So it's evened out throughout the life cycle of the project. And what that really does is it allows us to be able to build in Agile, which is a great way for any software company to build. And it also helps the client get visibility into the project in that Agile model. But with our hybrids, It allows the client to say, I know exactly how much this project's going to cost me. There's been contingency built in for any risks, and this is what they're going to bill me every month until the project is complete and I sign off on it. So it's a really good hybrid model that we've developed, and it works with majority of our clients, and it really allows you the visibility into what you need, and it sort of gives you a little bit of both worlds, which is nice to have. The fourth item that I think is really important to look at and really, really get in detail is workday overlap time zone. So the cost savings of offshore versus onshoring are difficult to overlook. I get it. It's way cheaper to offshore. But there's a disadvantage when it comes to the time difference between the US and Eastern Europe or Asia, which is where most of these offshore companies are located. So, some of them have up to 15-hour time difference. The company and the developers will hardly find themselves working together in real time. So, the developers are going to be off developing something. You're not going to get to work with them, for 8 hours a day. They're going to be doing their thing. You're going to be doing your thing, and the communication is going to suffer. And the result of that is usually what ends up happening in a lot of offshore development projects, where clients don't get what they want, what they expected, because the communication wasn't as open as it normally would be when you have a good overlap. Then obviously the fifth item sort of goes along with the whole offshore time savings and things, but English skills, both written and spoken, it is super important, and I cannot say this enough. The worst thing to have is software built with spelling mistakes in it. So you want to make sure that the team that you're selecting has those skills, and they can prove those skills to you. Even if the entire team doesn't have those skills, it's okay. But you do need like the key people, such as the team lead, the engineer, the senior developers. They need to have those English skills, and it's not just a matter of being able to speak English. You want to be able to understand what they're saying. You want to be able to translate and understand. When I say understand, I'm meaning like you want to be able to articulate yourself and know that they're going to understand you, and vice versa. So super important point. I can't say it enough. And then obviously my sixth point is cultural disconnect. And I know this is not something that people usually think about, but based on my own personal experience with offshore teams, I actually think this is like a super important point. It is really amazing how things can go really, really badly when there is a culture disconnect. The difference in culture creates steep learning curve at the beginning of the engagement, right? As it may take months to learn or adapt to each other's cultures and professional norms. So I'll give you an example. In these offshore companies, for example, which are located in different parts of the world, they may have cultures where women don't run the companies, such as, myself running a company here in Canada. And now they're having to deal with a woman sort of, guiding them and telling them what needs to be done. And I'm just using this as an example because women in tech is sort of a big topic. And if there's a cultural difference where they're not used to something like that, someone like me is going to have a really, really, really hard time articulating myself and, having authority, because they're not used to that. Their culture is just different. Or another cultural difference may be, they have a leadership scale that they follow. And if you're a junior resource in Canada trying to to communicate to a senior resource in another country, they're not going to respect you. They're going to think that they're better than you. There's just a lot of different cultural things to really look at. So you want to be able to work with a team and a country that sort of has a similar North American culture to yours. And if they don't, you have to be prepared to go through the process of having to teach them a little bit about your culture, setting the expectations of this is how it's going to work. If you don't like it, you need to tell us now and walk away, because you have to set boundaries very early, because cultural differences can have a huge impact on your project, and it can affect your staff if they feel disrespected in any way, shape, or form, and vice versa. I'm not just saying that it's cultural for North Americans. It's also for them. It's a bit of a culture shock to have somebody telling them what to do that would never normally do that, right? So something really critical to think about, because it will affect the project. It will affect the personalities. It will affect the mood and how the whole project is set. And then obviously another big one that I do like to discuss, and I know not a lot of people think about this, but if you're in North America, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm talking about SRED. So SRED. And what SRED is in North America, particularly in Canada, is the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentive Program. So what is SRED? SRED is a program that's put together by the Canadian government that allows development companies to claim a refund on some of the projects that they have built. Now, there are a lot of criteria for what you can claim. And one of the criteria is that your team has to be located in North America. Can't be offshore. So if you're offshoring, you will not be able to claim SRED. One thing to think about. Now, the SRED program consists of, you have to prove to the SRED program that you have a scientific project that is outside of the norm, and it has very specific things that required research, that required a brand new way of developing, and it's a whole process to go through. Now, at Converge, we usually help our clients who want to claim SRED go through this process. And, when you do offshore, you can't claim SRED. However, good point to point out here is if you are using a third party like a Converge company, Converge Digital Solutions, if you use a company like ours to manage your offshore team, you will be able to claim some of the SRED, because you will have onshore resources like your business analysts, your quality assurance team, your development managers, your CTOs, your business analysts, and all of these individuals that are located onshore, they are doing all of that research, and they're putting together the blueprints for the development. And you can even have, a team lead developer be onshore and have only a few developers offshore. So there's a lot of ways that you can work with an onshore company to still be able to claim some of the SRED credits that can be available to you. So something really, something critical to think about, because some of those SRED incentives can give you back 30% of the project in funds that you can get back from the government. So great program, very popular. However, you can't claim it if you're doing 100% of your development offshore. But if you're looking to develop something and get some SRED, you can work with a company like Converge to help you through the process. Another one that I want to look at here is the size of the team needed, so resources. When you're selecting an offshore team, obviously the cost is going to be based on how many people are going to be on your team. So, the offshore company is always going to tell you how many people they think they need. But they can be giving you a lot more resources than you actually need, and that means you'll be paying more. Having more bodies on a team doesn't make the project, number one, go faster, doesn't fix issues quicker, and sometimes can actually create a bigger issue than having a smaller team. And what I mean by that is when you have more people on the project, you have different people doing more variety of different things. So when something goes wrong, first you have to figure out who was working on that, and then go search for the piece of source code where they were, and try to fix it. When it comes to software developers, everyone has a different way of working. And I mean, it's not just software developers, that's the whole world. Like when I open up Excel, for example, the way I use it could be very different than the way my coworker uses it, and it could be very different than the way their friend uses it, etc. It's a piece of software. It has a process and ways of using it, but I use it differently than other people, and that's very normal. So in software development, it's the same strategy, right? So you're going to have a team of 5, 6, 10 different people, and they're all going to have their own way of doing things. So sometimes on a very critical project, it's better to have a smaller team where there is a closer communication and they can collaborate more, and you don't have the chaos of having all these different bodies. And also the cost is going to be a little bit less if you have less resources, but it might make more sense. So it is important for you. I mean, you may not know how many resources are important and how many you should have, but you have to try and sort of do the research up front and get some ideas from maybe local teams on how that should work. I mean, obviously, when you work with a onshore company like Converge to manage your offshore project for you, you don't have to worry about any of those things, because we will make sure we select the right offshore partner for you. We will make sure that you have only the resources that you need. So things to think about. But if you do decide to go at it alone, this is something that you should really look into and make sure that you're not over-resourced. Another great point that I have here is education requirements. Every country has a different way of teaching software engineers how to develop. Every country has different standards, and every university has their own way of teaching. So when you're hiring an offshore company, you don't know. You don't know what schools they went to. You don't know what certifications they have. So you have to do that research. You have to ask those offshore companies to provide you that information. And are these developers that went on the internet and learned how to code themselves? Or are they engineers that actually went to school and got their engineering degree or their software development, and they are experts and they can really do that work for you? Too often, I know that this sounds like education requirements, really. It is such an important point. Too often, I have clients coming to me saying, they hired some guy offshore, and later, months in the project, they found out that he was a one-man shop working out of his basement, didn't have the qualifications required to really develop that type of project, didn't have the industry or technical domain, and 8 months into the project, they're like, I'm not getting what I want. He's not responding. Cultural differences are kicking in. Time zone differences are hitting. In this particular case, this individual was located in India, which is a big time difference, and they just couldn't connect with him on time. There was when they were awake, he was sleeping, and vice versa. So by the end of it, all of these things that are super important that I've been listing out that they didn't really take into account started affecting the project. And at the end of the day, they had to scrap the entire project and start from scratch with a local onshore company, because they knew that if they continued on that path, it was only going to get worse. So things that don't seem like they're super important from the get-go, but then they start becoming really important towards the end of the project, and you start seeing the effects of the decisions that are being made and the list. If you go through the list and you follow some of this advice that I'm giving you, you will see how it will have an effect on your project. Then obviously this brings me to my next point, which is certifications and awards. So when you're selecting an offshore partner, you want to check their references. You want to call some of their old clients and ask them, what kind of project they built, technical domain expertise. You can get that information right there. How were they while they were building the project for you? Did they build the project on time and on budget? Super important point. You do not want to be working with a vendor that's just going to, the project they tell you is going to be 6 months and then it ends up being a year or 2 or 3. The development company should be able to tell you it's going to take 8 months to develop a project. If at some point they realize that they were wrong and it's going to take longer, they should be able to communicate that to you. With that being said, I realize that there's a lot of risks and assumptions that go into projects, but it is the software development company's job to make sure that they are taking over that process and communicating that to you. So when you're looking for, things that they're doing and certificates and awards, you want to make sure that you're checking references and you're checking their past projects and you're looking at the actual work that they've done to make sure that they have all of these items that I've listed out. And the proof is going to be in the actual projects that they've done and built, so and to my last point, I don't want to drag this on. I just want to say, make sure you vet the developer or the outsourcing company you decide to partner with. Ask questions whose answers reveal whether or not they have the work ethic, values, English proficiency, and technical skills that they need to be able to work efficiently with you. This is a hard job to do, and that's why companies like Converge have programs in place to help you get the best out of your offshore project, meaning you can still offshore, but you can work with an onshore partner to manage this entire process that I've listed out for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me anytime. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.